Hello, welcome. I'm Sian, I'm a psychotherapist, and today I'm going to be talking about a really important part of healing from emotionally immature parenting. And that is decentering your parents. When you have emotionally immature parents, they are front and center of your life as a child. They demand the focus. This is the emotionally immature part. And a mature parent steps back, steps down, steps out a bit. Not that they're not available, but their child is able to form a relationship with themselves. Their child's needs, opinions, beliefs, ideas have room to blossom and to grow. But with emotionally immature parents, this doesn't really happen. Their needs take centre stage, their worries, their anxieties, their problems, their feelings take centre stage. And also, there's often an insecure attachment happening between children and emotionally immature parents, which means that you might, as you grow older, maintain a really close relationship with them, which is not problematic in and of itself. However, it might be to your detriment. It might be to the point that you are still quite preoccupied with your family of origin, still quite preoccupied with your parents, with their approval, with their opinions. Hang in there if you are not in contact with your parents, because this is still relevant for you. But I'm just going to speak to this first, that there can be this kind of, rather than the natural separation that happens, ideally in adolescence, we start kind of moving away from our parents. And when that's allowed to happen in a healthy way, it means that as adults, we are autonomous. We're not going to run a decision past our dad at 35, or we're not checking what mum thinks of something that's happened or something that you want to do with your life when you're 50 years old, that you have kind of been able to separate from them enough that you're checking in with yourself about those decisions. But with emotionally immature parenting, that doesn't happen, because we have this role reversal often whereby you maybe have grown up feeling responsible for them, feeling really heavily tuned into their emotions, their needs, what's going on for them. And so you're kind of given this inbuilt hypersensitivity to your parents. And that keeps them in the center of your universe, if you like, well into adulthood. But actually what we want to start doing is initiating that separation process. Now, even if you are not actually in contact with your parents, maybe they've passed away, maybe the relationship has broken down, or if you're in contact with them but not that often, you speak to them every now and then, or you see them occasionally, it might seem like this isn't relevant, but we can still be centering our parents even when we don't actually see them much, because we're centering them in terms of what they would think of something that we're doing. Would they approve, would they not? And maybe we're, in reaction to that, maybe you're not doing something because they wouldn't approve. Unconsciously, this process might be happening. Or maybe you are doing something knowing that they wouldn't approve, but it feels like a rebellion and you'll do it anyway. But it's still all in relation to them, rather than your parents just not really featuring that much any more than anyone else, right? If you've got a reasonable relationship with your parents now, then ideally, in a healthy way, they would feature as much as maybe some of your friends, or maybe less, in your life, in your thought processes. They would certainly not be the focus. And because what happens is, when we continue to allow our parents to take this central role, whether it's literally in our lives and we see them a lot and we see them more than is beneficial for us, or we speak to them more than is beneficial for us, or when we're just centering them in terms of what they might think, what their values were, what their beliefs might have been, and we are either aligning with those things or we are deliberately rebelling against them, Either way, all of this comes at a cost to our relationship with ourselves, because there's simply not enough space, not enough room. And this is what would have happened in your childhood. This is just a kind of mirroring, a kind of continuation really of that process, that there wasn't enough space for you because of their stuff, because they took up the relationship with all of their issues. And so when we continue as adults to centre our parents, to hold them in high esteem, to put them maybe in some focal point, when we continue to do that, we are continuing to deny ourselves a relationship with self, an authentic relationship with self. And so decisions become difficult. It's going to be really hard for you to live a life that feels like yours, fully and completely. So it's really important to start shifting that and to put yourself in the centre instead. And when I say put yourself in the centre, that doesn't mean that your whole world and life and being becomes just about yourself. Of course, there are so many other elements, but your relationship with yourself needs to be more important than your relationship with your parents when you're an adult. And this is what happens with quote unquote healthy parent-child dynamics. No parent-child dynamic is perfect, but also not every person has to deal with narcissistic parents or parents who are profoundly emotionally unaware or profoundly lacking in self-awareness or are fundamentally selfish. Not everybody has to deal with those things. And so the people that don't have to deal with those types of parents and have a healthier dynamic with their mother or father, they are not at 35, at 45, at 55 checking in with what their parents think of them and their decisions. They are not running everything past their parents. They are not thinking, I need to call mum and let her know this straight away about everything, right? They still will have a relationship with their parents, enjoy each other, let each other know, what's happening with their lives, live alongside each other. But living alongside, which is a healthy stance, living alongside each other is not the same as having this central kind of position in someone else's life and having ultimately still lots of power and lots of say over what is happening for you. And that's what happens when parents are centered in this way. So let's think about how you can do this. Well, obviously this is going to depend on where you're at with your parents. As I say, this is relevant whether you speak to your mum every day or you haven't spoken to your parents for 15 years. It can still be relevant. Really, it's about focusing on building your relationship with yourself and building that up in a way that feels slow, steady, and authentic. Bit by bit, you are getting more and more familiar with who you are, with what you want, with what you need in life, with how you're feeling, with what's happening in your body, with what matters to you, what is important to you, what your values are. All of this stuff, the more you do this, the more you lean into this and embed yourself in understanding who you are. First of all, this is healing, because that's what healing kind of is recovery. It's recovering your relationship with yourself. So the more you do that, the more you'll heal. But also there will naturally become less space and scope for your parents to take up such a central position in your life. They will naturally shift. If you are in contact with them, they'll naturally kind of shift into a more, less elevated position in your life. That absolutely doesn't mean you don't need to have a relationship with them. You definitely can, but they won't be in the back of your mind all the time, right? There won't be this preoccupation that happens when our parents are emotionally immature as children, and when we know that, when we kind of see them as children, which we typically always do or often do. So that will kind of naturally fall into place. And if you find yourself not in contact with your parents or having very low contact with them, but you know that they're still there, they're still in your mind, they're still kind of in the background more than you want them to be. They're still affecting you and what you do and don't do. Then the more you focus on creating that nourishing connection with yourself, again, they will naturally fade away. Their voice, if you're carrying their voice with you in your head, their criticisms, their critiques of things, their opinions, that voice will become yours instead. And hopefully the quality and the nature of the content of those thoughts will change and become softer as well. But this will naturally happen the more you focus on building your relationship with yourself, your self-awareness, your understanding of who you are. So I hope that has been helpful for you, and do get in touch if you have a specific request for a topic for me to talk about. Happy to talk about anything related to childhood trauma or emotionally immature parenting, all day, every day. Happy to talk about that. Let me know which area of focus would be particularly helpful for you at this time. Take care.